Even if you don't know anyone personally suffering from an opioid dependency, you are impacted. Nationally, the cost to taxpayers is already in the billions, and here at home, it's adding up. Chris Williams offers perspective.
Think you're not impacted by this crisis? Think again. Even if the staggering number of Kentuckians and Hoosiers killed every year alone is not enough to get your attention, wait until you see how much it's costing even those with no connection to someone using or killed by overdose. You've seen 737 passenger jets. They hold about 150 people, including crew. In 2017, Kentucky lost the equivalent of nearly 8 737s. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 1,160 people died of opioid abuse. Indiana doesn't single out opioids in their drug abuse death stats, but their total 2017 age-adjusted deaths credited to drug abuse was 1,852 people, and that's 12 1/3 737s. When someone dies, people often ask the question, what if someone hadn't died? What accomplishments don't we know about? What major contributions did they not make? Families of those lost in this crisis struggle with those heartbreaking questions every day. Even for those living with addiction, there's a fair question. What is our society missing out on because of their absence? It's costing every Kentuckian $205 per year, every Hoosier $188 per year, according to a study by AEI, a policy think tank that calculated the cost to the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, and loss of productivity alone. In Kentucky, a state struggling with a pension debt crisis, precious resources have been pouring in to save lives that could be going to retirements. The executive director of Office of Drug Control Policy says $74 million has gone to helping them fund the fight in the past 2 state budgets. The feds have kicked in another $50 million. A large chunk of that funding goes to the life-saving drug Narcan. In 2018 alone, the Kentucky Agency for Substance Abuse Policy spent 30% of its budget on Narcan kits. The executive director told me that amounts to about $330,000. And here's why that money and more is needed. In 2017, Kentucky providers wrote 86.8 opioid prescriptions for every 100 Kentuckians. Indiana wasn't far behind at 74.2 opioid prescriptions for every 100 Hoosiers. Both of the states were well ahead of the national average, which is alarming. 58.7 opioid prescriptions were written for every 100 Americans.